I gotta say, YouTube Fitness is truly a strange place. It's full of misinformation, contradicting ideas, and steroid abusers who have no idea how to train. This is where you're getting most of your advice, and it blows my mind. So in this video, I want to cover some of the things that I've heard and give you a different perspective, one that'll actually serve you as a real natural. Starting with the first point, emphasizing the compound movements. This is your foundation, not the isolations. That comes in at the end. And I'll be the first one to tell you that they're very important for maximizing your potential as well as injury prevention. But to say that that should be the majority of everything that you do is absolutely ludicrous. Not only does the evidence not suggest this, but neither does the history and the people who actually promote it. In most cases, I see guys who built their foundation off the squat, bench press, overhead press, weighted dip, pull up, all the big time-proven movements. This is how they got huge. This is how they built 90% of their physique. And now they're coming out showing you all these weird exercises. High volume isolations with maybe one compound thrown in at the very end, kind of like a pre-exhausting tool, which could have its benefits, but it's not what got you gains. Let's keep it real. So that's what's being promoted. Even though there's constant research coming out. Yeah, the compounds are the way to go. Isolations, it helps, but it's not everything. It gives you that extra edge. Some would say 20%, some would say even 10. The point is, you get big by getting stronger at the fundamentals, getting your bench press from 95 pounds to 225, improving your performance over time, either intentionally or unintentionally, because we can make the argument that progressive overload itself is evidence of hypertrophy, not the actual driver. So I'm not even gonna go into that debate. Many times I see guys doing fluff and pump type training on the isolations, never getting stronger year to year. These are the same dudes that have been struggling all this time. I've been making videos since 2013. These guys are still the same size when I go to the gym because they're not getting stronger at the basics. And the reason why many of these dudes are not promoting the basics is because they can't sell it for one, and they're trying to be unique. They want to give you something a little bit different, something that you haven't seen before, even though it's already been done. That's what people don't understand. YouTube Fitness cycles. We see trends come and go, but what always stays are the principles that real naturals have been using for a long time. I remember years back, I heard an argument about swimming, saying that if compound movements were truly the best, then swimming would be the best activity for bodybuilding. But the reason why we can't use that example is because of the sport-specific nature of swimming. In addition to the fact that it's endurance-based, the resistance is not the same, and there's all kinds of muscle groups involved. We're not talking about a bench press where it's primarily chest, shoulders, and triceps. So to make that comparison for bodybuilding doesn't really make much sense to me. So the way it works is, you get your volume in through the compounds, you take your sets close to failure, you make sure that you're doing good on a weekly basis, your total workload is high. And then, whatever weaknesses you may have, or whatever areas need additional work, you throw in some isolations, you throw in some curls after your chin-ups, preferably two, hammer and supinated. For the triceps, you can hit a push down and an extension. Make sure you're hitting the long head. For the lower body, you get some leg curls in, or glute ham raise, or some other type of accessory. You don't just rely on the compounds exclusively, because now we're talking about minimalist training, which is another world altogether. But still, I would have to make the case that minimalist training that emphasizes compounds is better than maximized isolation training that neglects the compounds. So I don't want to confuse you, but please focus on the major movement patterns first, and then throw in some extra stuff. Icing on the cake, but that's all it is, okay? Next. High volume training is generally better. It's crazy how people like to mention trends from a long time ago, like, oh, what do you think about Mike Mentzer's heavy duty training? It's not optimal, bro. That's what the evidence suggests. What we know is this: 10 to 20 sets a week per body part is generally the way to go. Low volume is effective, but as I've been saying for many years, there's a difference between effective and optimal. If you want to get the biggest of what you're capable of, you want to drive that volume as high as you possibly can. It doesn't take a lot to do that. So if you're just going in doing 3 sets overhead press, then you're done for your pressing, because again, now you're subscribing to minimalism. We have a different issue here. Likewise, if you're doing a bunch of junk volume, you're doing 8 different presses in the workout, that's absolutely psychotic. And there's one guy that I can think of on Instagram right now. He claims to be natural. He's obviously not. This mother does over 6 presses in the workout. Bro, what are you doing? That is way too high. So it reaches a point where it doesn't even make sense. Like, what are you doing, bro? The volume is excessive. But if we're not excessive, if we're in that 10 to 20 range on a weekly basis, we're good. And also on that point, when we talk about higher volume, it's typically better coupled with higher repetitions. Let's say in the 8 to 15 rep range, sometimes up to 20. But you want to be in that level. At least 35% of your 1 rep max, 75% is probably all you need if we're talking about efficiency here. Because yes, you can build muscle with reps of 3. You can build muscle with sets of 5. 5x5 is great, time proven, and you're getting 25 total reps. But you're in the gym longer, you gotta rest longer, and the truth is you'll build more muscle with a 5 sets of 10 approach. In less time, with more feasibility, better for bodybuilding, better for recovery. So when you think about gaining muscle, it's not that there's magical rep ranges, it's that there are approaches which are more feasible. And in this case, it happens to be a higher total number of sets with a little bit higher reps to go with it. Like nobody's doing 10 sets of 3 heavy squats, for example. They're gonna do a 3x10, which makes the most sense for the average person. So understand that there are different levels to this, and you don't have to start off with the highest volume right away. Build it up, but of course, get to that point. So don't just live in the 3 sets of 10 bubble, my man. Try 4 to 5 sets of 10. Heck, Leroy Colby used to do 6 sets of 10 for buys and tries. Recognize that there's a high chance that you're probably capable of more. Now, the next thing I want to cover is stimulus to fatigue, which I've been calling getting more out of less weight. This is extremely important because recovery is number one. Basically, when you perform an exercise, there's a certain training stimulus that you get from it, but also systemic fatigue, which affects your recovery not only within that workout, but during the resting periods as well. And when we talk about bodybuilding, I mentioned how a higher volume approach is generally the way to go, right? But certain exercises don't make much sense for that. And probably the worst movement I can possibly think of would be the conventional deadlift for this purpose specifically. Basically, I would not have you doing a 5 sets of 10 conventional deadlift. I don't think that makes a lot of sense. You're increasing the risk of getting injured, and it has a horrific, absolutely terrible stimulus to fatigue ratio. What's much more practical is switching to the RDL. The remaining deadlift will allow you to get the eccentric component while using a lot less weight. So you're getting that stretch reflex action in the hamstrings. It's a lower weight, yet you're still going to failure, you're still getting stronger. This is what bodybuilders should be doing. Or better yet, the good morning, because now we're doing a fraction of the RDL weight. But because of the moment arms, the leverages involved, we're getting more or less weight. So this has to be considered. And for me personally, when I see exercise that have a poor stimulus to fatigue ratio, I prefer to use higher percentages. I like to go heavy on these types of lift, not do my volume work. Instead, volume that I do on my belt squats will be much higher than my back squat volume, even though the back squat is actually pretty damn good. Like, it's a lot easier on recovery compared to deadlifts. And the proof in that is the fact that we can use a higher frequency approach. Most people who do Bulgarian light training, it's on the back squats, not the conventional deads. That's why the behind the backs and the trap bars and all these variations became more popular, as did sumo. It's easier to recover from. So back squats are cool, but belt squats make more sense, for me anyway, especially doing reps of 20, you know? And your lower back and other little muscle groups aren't going to be the limiting factor here. So even though the exercise might be amazing and nothing's really wrong with it, sometimes it's smarter to get in your volume through other means, other compound movements that have a better stimulus to fatigue ratio. And that'll bring me on to my next point, which you're probably starting to realize is all interconnected. Full range of motion, my friend. This is what you want. It's generally superior for hypertrophy. Why? We get more out of less weight, so better stimulus to fatigue ratio. And secondly, we're getting the proper motor unit activation with the weighted stretch to accompany it. Let me keep it real with you. This constant tension stuff that a lot of people are promoting, there's no real evidence backing it up. It's mostly steroid abusing bros that talk about this. Or if they are using it, it doesn't necessarily improve their gains that much more than if they didn't. Because the truth is, what we actually know is that if you're taking those muscle groups close to or directly at failure, you stimulated the hypertrophic gains. There's nothing that you are really missing out. So if I literally can't curl anymore, I can't bend it whatsoever, the fact that I didn't do constant reps doesn't change much. I went to failure. And if I continuously do that over time, and now I'm getting stronger at those curls, I get that dumbbell curl from 20 to 40, my biceps are going to reflect that size-wise, especially when the volume is appropriate. So what's more important is the total weekly workload, as well as having quality sets with consistent full range of motion. Yes, partials can have applications in different ways, sport specificity, or you want to emphasize certain areas like doing block pulls as opposed to deficit deadlifts. Not trying to hit the posterior chain as hard, but you want to overload the upper back and traps. Certain benefits like that, you know, progressive range of motion. So in the strength training context, partials can certainly have their place. And what's also important to consider is there's a difference between actual full range of motion according to your anthropometry versus full range of motion of the exercise. And even when we talk about, oh, you're doing full range, sometimes it's not the case. Like the conventional deadlift, we are talking about the size of the Olympic plates. So it's not truly a full range exercise in that context. But I think you understand what I'm saying, that if you're doing the full range of motion for you, then you're good to go. And certainly keeping a big arm bend or not locking out, that's not full range of motion. And also the idea that locking out is somehow bad for your joints is not really supported either. In fact, the opposite may be true. The opposite may be true on both levels. Like doing a full range of motion bench press, that's how you maximize your pectoral development, get the weight to stretch to their full capacity, and also strengthen the tendons and ligaments so that you are less prone to pec tears. Same thing could be said for biceps. You want to get the full range of motion at the bottom. This way, you're less likely to tear your bicep, especially if you plan on doing a lot of deadlifts. So this is what we want from a bodybuilding standpoint. The truth is that partials, especially manual ones, are not more effective. They can be helpful in eliminating black and white thinking in the sense that we want to incorporate everything. Like for me, I believe in deficits, your classic range of motion, and partials. I think if you mix in everything, you're going to maximize your strength and size. But if I can only lean towards one, it would be full range, not partials, especially coupled with the TUT type training that's becoming increasingly more popular. There's nothing wrong with conventional form. And with that said, I want to talk about the final point for today's video. See, in the strength training world, there's a very popular saying that you're only as strong as your weakest link. I want to twist that a bit for bodybuilding. You're only as big as your weakest link. Basically, sometimes you're already good enough. It's just that there are certain areas that are distorting the proportions of your physique. And this is what needs emphasis. Not getting a ton more muscle in areas that you think would make the difference. It becomes a question of illusions and prioritization. Oftentimes, a guy will weigh less than you and perform less than you, but because certain areas are more developed, he looks more jacked, especially if talking face to face. If a guy does a lot of neck training, he has 19 inches unflexed, he's probably going to dwarf you when standing side by side. If you look at him, he's going to look bigger overall. If a guy's yoked, it really shows. And we can argue the same thing when talking about body fat percentage if you're wearing clothing, right? But like in a general aesthetic state, just being a jacked guy, outer extremities of the body and areas that people don't typically think about is probably what you should do. Like emphasizing the side and rear delts to really maximize that 3D pop. Getting your calf development on a different level. A lot of guys never trained their calves. They're in the gym for 5-10 years. They still haven't done any calf raises. And they say, oh, I have bad calf genetics. No, you don't. They're untrained. The guys who have naturally big calves, they have good genetics. That's the difference. How can you tell me you have bad genetics for a muscle group you never even trained? That just means you're average, man. And certainly, if you put in a few years of work, you'll gain another 1 to 2 inches, or maybe even 3 or more. But to say that, oh, I got 14-inch calves and I'm stuck with this for life. No, you're not. You can probably get 16 plus. You just don't want to do it. Let's just keep it real. So oftentimes when we talk about things like chicken legs, it's the calves, bro. Or guys are quad dominant. They're really big from the front, but then they turn sideways or around. They got no glutes, no hamstrings. Also, spinal rectors tend to be lagging. Or guys are going to be more dominant in one part of the upper body. It might be arm dominant or torso dominant. In that case, the best way to look bigger is by correcting your weaknesses directly, not putting more emphasis on other areas that are already dwarfing the rest of your physique. So if you already got huge legs and you're bottom heavy, you don't emphasize that more, gain an extra 1 to 2 inches. Maybe you go in a maintenance phase or you gain a bit more size, but you put way more emphasis on the areas that are actually lagging. And maybe that's why a lot of guys have body dysmorphia. They're actually jacked, but because they have these few little areas, they think they're small. I know in my case, I'm definitely guilty of this in the sense that my arms are lagging. When I look at my physique elsewhere, I'm like, God damn, I'm happy with what I'm seeing. But when I look at the arms, I'm like, bro, if only I had those 17s, imagine what I would look like. And for other guys, it could be the forearms or the upper chest. There's always one muscle group that is holding you back. And sometimes you just got to emphasize it a bit more to complete the rest of the package. So I just want you to be honest about that. Look in the mirror and ask, which areas are really holding back my physique? Once you know what that is, it's time to go ham. And on that note, let me inform you that I'll be making a video on specialization. I'm going to cover everything you need to know about that. So for guys who have lagging areas, don't worry, I got you covered. But for now, start thinking about it and coming up with ways of overcoming it. Because You probably have the answers to a large extent already, including many things I talked about today. And with that said, homies, I'm done talking. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you can relate to some of the things I'm talking about. Let me know what your experience has been with some of the methods I discussed or some of the things that you hear very often in the online fitness community. I'd love to hear feedback. And with that said, I'll talk to you in the next video.